Welcome to the Deep Dive. So today we're looking into the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. He's the interim president of Burkina Faso.
That's right. And quite a figure, just 37, Africa's youngest leader.
Yeah, and his arrival on the scene back in 2022, it really kicked off a lot of debate, didn't it? About African sovereignty, neocolonialism.
Absolutely. It touched a nerve.
Our goal here is really just to unpack the key things about his leadership, what's made him so, well, talked about.
And you really can't understand Traoré without understanding the situation in Burkina Faso. I mean, years of this brutal Islamist insurgency.
It's staggering, isn't it?
Yeah.
Affecting over 60% of the country. Millions displaced.
Exactly. And that instability, well, it led to 2 coups in just 8 months. It tells you something about the level of crisis.
And apparently a lot of people there felt, that military intervention was maybe justified against leaders who weren't effective.
Yeah, reports suggested that View had significant support. It's a tough context.
Right. So Traoré himself, he comes from the military. He served with the UN in Mali, even got recognition for bravery.
He did. And what seems clear is that he became a sort of lightning rod for frustration within the ranks.
Frustration about how the insurgency was being handled, lack of gear, bad strategy, that kind of thing.
Precisely. He voiced what many soldiers, especially on the front lines, were feeling. That's kind of the launch pad for his rise.
Okay, so let's get into his actions as president. One of the biggest things, obviously, was his stance against France.
Oh, definitely. Expelling the French military forces. That was huge.
And he didn't just kick them out. He accused them of being ineffective, even exploitative.
Which, for many, looked like a major step towards real sovereignty. It tapped right into that vein of African nationalism.
You see this challenging of former colonial powers happening elsewhere, too, right? Part of a bigger trend.
It seems to be. Questioning old partnerships, looking for, well, relationships on different terms.
And that feeds into his move towards Russia, criticizing what he calls new colonialism.
Exactly. Seeking alternatives. It plays well domestically, seems very popular there. But internationally, it raises eyebrows, concerns about swapping one dependency for another, perhaps.
Then there's the regional play, forming the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES, with Mali and Niger.
Right after the French troops were pushed out of those countries, too, it looks like a direct response.
A symbol of regional resistance, maybe, against that perceived external influence.
You could certainly see it that way. And their recent exit from ECOWAS, the regional economic bloc, just underlines that shift away from established structures.
It definitely redraws the map a bit, doesn't it? Raises questions about regional cooperation going forward.
It does. Now, the economic front is also really interesting, a strong push for economic nationalism.
Yeah, like nationalizing gold mines, setting up a state-owned company, Sopameb.
And granting a license to a big potential revenue there, plus halting exports of unrefined gold to Europe.
Building their own refinery, too, trying to keep more of the value chain inside Burkina Faso.
That seems to be the goal, reclaiming control over resources and, notably, rejecting financial help from the IMF and World Bank.
That's a bold move, avoiding those potential strings attached.
That's likely the thinking. Avoiding conditions seen as limiting sovereignty. It's about forging an independent path economically.
But it's not just economics. He's also focused on social welfare, it seems.
Right. Reports of improvements in healthcare mobile clinics, oxygen units, even things like free surgeries.
And support for agriculture, apparently leading to record cereal production this year.
Yes, that's been reported. Actions like that, plus symbolic gestures.
Like reversing his own pay rise.
Yeah.
Keeping his captain's salary.
And the African-inspired school uniforms. Things like that build a connection, reinforce an image of a leader focused on the nation.
Okay, but we have to talk about the controversies, too, because they are significant.
Absolutely. First off, the way he came to power a coup, that immediately raises questions about democratic legitimacy.
And then the human rights concerns. Reports of forced conscription targeting journalists and activists.
Media censorship, too, and allegations of abuses by security forces. These are serious concerns.
The government tends to frame these as necessary security measures, right? But it's a worrying trend.
It is. And then there's the postponement of elections. They were planned for 2024.
Now extended for 5 years, after consultations that some groups boycotted.
Correct. So the path back to democracy seems delayed. That adds another layer of complexity and concern for many observers.
People often compare him to Thomas Sankara, young, anti-imperialist, pan-Africanist.
The parallels are definitely there. Austerity, focus on self-sufficiency. Both represent a kind of radical break.
Though people also point out ideological differences. It's not a perfect match.
No, it's not. Different times, different contexts, nuances in their thinking. But the comparison itself is significant. It tells you how he's perceived by some.
So how is he viewed overall? Domestically, it seems like there's quite a bit of support. Rallies, positive survey data.
Yes, considerable public backing appears evident. Even internationally, getting applause at events in neighboring countries like Ghana.
But the wider international reaction is pretty split, isn't it?
Very much so. Condemnation and sanctions from some Western nations, from ECOWAS before the withdrawal. But then you have support from other African nations, Pan-African movements, solidarity protests even.
It really highlights these different perspectives on sovereignty, intervention, and the right path for African nations.
It does. There's a clear disconnect between how his leadership is seen internally by many and how it's viewed by some powerful external actors.
Which brings us back to the central question, really. When you look at Ibrahim Traoré, are you seeing a radical disruptor forging a genuinely new path for Africa? Or is his approach, with all its controversies, setting a kind of dangerous precedent?
It's the key question, isn't it? Disruptor or dangerous precedent? Maybe elements of both.
Definitely leaves you with a lot to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive.